So let's try to combine some things that we've learned from the previous two videos and make something kind of practical here. So what I want is a new artboard that maybe I could print out and just have some boxes to help me if I'm planning a project. So first thing I need is a new artboard, and if I come over here and click on the artboard tool, I get this new cursor for drawing artboards. And if I want this to be about the same distance away from the other artboards, I'll just kind of make a guess at that. And I'm not even going to worry about making it the correct size at first. I'm going to use the properties panel to help me with that. So if I go over here to the properties panel, and just keep in mind the way these work, if something else is selected, you'll click on properties. And again, if this is not what's showing, then go up here and reset essentials. But the property panels now shows me the properties for the artboard, and it shows me the width and the height. So I want a 8.5 by 11 artboard. The thing I want to do before I change these numbers is right now it would change from the center outward, and it would end up covering part of this artboard. So what I'll do to make sure that it grows only this way and this way is I'll click right here, and now if I enter in 8.5, hit the tab key, and 11, hit the tab key again, now I have a new artboard. That is the size of the paper I will be printing on. Now let's pretend that the thing that we want to draw out ideas for will eventually be 11 inches wide by 17 inches tall. So if I'm going to draw ideas for something that's going to be that size but draw them smaller, I want the area that I'm drawing the ideas in to be the same ratio. So what's an easy way to do that without having to do a bunch of translating math? I'll just simply come over here, grab the rectangle tool, I'll click here to open up the dialog box, and I'll make the box way too big at first. I'll make it actual size. So I'm going to put in the width of 11, height of 17, and then click OK, and there is my oversized or actual size box. But now what I want is a derivative of this that's the exact same ratio. So all I have to do for that is come over here, grab the selection tool, click on the corner. If I hold down the shift key, I'm going to get the exact same ratio. And I'm going to try to size this just as a guess, a size that I could fit 9 of these on the page. So I'm going to release the mouse, then release the shift key last so that I don't mess up the proportion or the ratio. And now I just want to stroke on these, no fill. So I'm going to bring the fill forward, hit the none option. And if I had this at any other color than black, I would bring it forward and dial in black. And a quick way to do that is you can see this thing likes to open up to help you out. Black and white are real easy to choose from here. And we'll talk more about what these are later. Okay, so now that we've got this, let's just kind of move this a little bit so that in our mind we're seeing 9 of these. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag but hold down the option key, and I can also hold down the shift key to help lock the constraints in. And let's say that's pretty good right there. I'll release the mouse, release the shift and the option key, and then I'm going to use a shortcut here to duplicate, Command D. Now I'm not even 100% sure what the equivalent of that is up here. It might be under Edit, but it's either going to be Command D or Control D should give you that duplicate. And then I'll select all 3 of these again using the selection tool with the drag. Remember, that just makes a marquee, and anything it touches it selects. Then I'll hold down the option key. Well, I'll start to drag first, then I'll hold down the option key, hold down the shift key to constrain the direction. Guessed that that's about in the middle there. And then release the mouse, release the 2 modifier keys, and then do Command D again. And there, Now I could print this out, do a bunch of little drawings to get my ideas. Now let's talk about a few more ways of using colors in this program. What I'm going to do just to give us some areas to work on here, I'm going to grab the artboard tool again and look over here in the properties panel. You can see that this right here is checked. It says move artwork with artboard. So with the artboard tool, I can move my artboards around. I'm going to Command Z to back that up. I can also make copies of them. So if I hold down the Option key and maybe even the Shift key to constrain the direction, release the Modifier keys, release the mouse. Now let's talk about if we wanted to fill this in with a different color. We know that we can come over here, bring the fill color forward, double click on it, and we can use this color selection method as well. But often this pops up. If it doesn't, remember you can just go to Window and find Color or Color Guide if you wanted to use that. This is a real quick way of dialing in a color, and you can see as I play with these sliders, it changes the color. So this would be good if somebody told you what the RGB mixture was. If you have your document set to CMYK, then you will see CMYK sliders in here. And you can also put your cursor down in here. So let's say I wanted a real, like, kind of light-ish blue. I could click in here, and that's the color that it's going to give me. And you can see because I had this selected, it already changed the color. Now, once you have colors that you want to work with that you're either given from your client or you come up with on your own, you may want to have those readily available to reuse almost in the same fashion as these things here, where all you have to do is click on it. So that is known as the Swatches panel. And so to get that, I'm going to go Window, and I'm going to go to, let's see, yeah, Swatches. It's by itself in here, and I get this. And so let's say that I really like this blue color. So what I want to do is come over and select on it first. Make sure that the fill color is on top that I like over here. And I'm just going to simply click and drag that over to here. And now I have my own swatch. I can even double click on this and give it a name. Click OK, and now if I want to use that in the future, I just simply click on something that I want to fill with that color, click on it, and in one easy step I have the color in there. If you want to learn more about color, you can either look at some of my other videos or just Google and find other videos on the topic. But over here on my website under Software Help, Illustrator, there's a video set here dealing with coloring in work. Another thing you probably want to become a little bit familiar with in this program is how do you change the fill to be much bigger. Now, luckily with this new improved properties panel, all I have to do is click on something and the properties for that show. But there is a separate fill panel as well, and I'll go ahead and bring that out right now. So we'll go to Windows and, oh, I said fill, sorry, I meant stroke panel. Where are you? Should be alphabetical here unless it's housed within something else. And that is something to be aware of when you're going to Windows and trying to find something like type, for example. When you see this character, you can see there's a lot of different things for type. Another example is brushes, but we're just looking for stroke. Bring that out, and you can see it looks pretty darn simple like this, but there's this little thing next to here that says show options, and that'll bring out even more things. So first I'm just going to work from here where it's easier. So let's say we want to change the color of this and we're too lazy to go all the way over here. We can just click here and it opens up a little panel here, and we chose a new color, and let's click that again, and let's uptick the stroke size. So start clicking up, and now I'm up to a 13-point stroke on there. Now you can change further things with this panel, and one of the things is you can switch to a dash line. And if you want to know more about dash lines, and of course Google that, because there's all kinds of little definitive settings you can put in here. Oh, and one more thing that's helpful to know with the stroke panel is, what if you want a line with arrows on it and you don't want to have to draw your own arrows? You can just simply make a line, and one way to make a line is with this line segment tool that's housed with all the other shape tools. And let's say I just click and drag here. Now I'm going to first get rid of the dashed line on there by clicking there to get rid of that. And I'll make the stroke weight a little less. And then all I have to do is go over to arrowhead. So if I go to this one, it'll give me an arrowhead on this side. And if I go over here, it gives me an arrowhead on the finishing side. And you can see there's a lot of different arrowheads to choose from. I want to tell you more about the modifier keys in the program. I need another artboard here to do some drawing on. And this time I don't want the artwork to come across with it. So when I choose the artboard tool, I'm going to uncheck this. And now I'm going to click and drag, hold down the Option key and the Shift key, release the mouse, release the keys. So that's an example of the modifier keys that I'm talking about right there, the Option key, the Shift key. So let's just talk a little bit in detail about the Shift key. So the Shift key's primary job is restraint. So if I click and drag with the rectangle tool, I can get whatever shape I want. If I hold down the Shift key, when I click and drag, I get a perfect square. So it constrains it to a perfect square. Now I do have to be careful that I release the mouse first, because watch what happens if I release the Shift key first while I'm pushing down. I accidentally at the last minute, it won't constrain. And sometimes you don't notice that if it's real close to a perfect square. So the best thing to do is just Command Z, back up, do it again. This time make sure that you do your do what you need to do with the Shift key held down. But this time you're going to physically say to yourself, I am releasing the mouse. Now I'm releasing the Shift key. And that'll work very similar try it with all these tools, with the ellipse tool, or what is the proper name for that? It is the ellipse tool. When you hold down the Shift key, you get a perfect circle. Now the Alt key, if you hold that down and you drag something, or the Option key, Alt or Option key, you get a copy of that thing. Whoops. There's an example of I released the modifier key too soon. So Command Z to back that up. Click, drag, hold down the Option key, release the mouse, release the modifier key. What else? If you want to resize something, even though this was drawn as a perfect shape, I can resize it to a non-perfect shape. I can Command Z, and if I hold down the Shift key and I click and drag, it will make sure that it stays the exact proportion that it was before. Command Z. Now, if I click and drag here, you can see that it grows from the opposite corner that I'm dragging from. What if I want it to grow right from the middle? Then what I can do is I can click and drag, but this time I'm going to hold down the Option key, and you see how it grows from the center out. And I can hold down the Option key and the Shift key at the same time to constrain the proportions and draw from the center out. Let's talk about the stacking order of items. So if I click on this blue and I move it over here by the black, why is this one underneath? Well, that has to do with the order in which you draw them. So something new that you've drawn recently will show up above something that you drew before. You have control over that, however. And there's two ways. One is with changing it to a new layer that's on top, which we'll talk about in a minute, but you can change things within the layer. So I just want you to see that over here, by default, you'll have this layers panel, and by default, you'll have one single layer. We're going to stick for a minute here with just one layer. So let's say I want the blue on top. Easy way to do that is just click the item and then right click and go to Arrange. And if we choose this one, Bring to Front, this means it'll bring it all the way. It'll be the highest level item on that layer. And now when I move that over the top, it is on top of that one. I'm not a huge fan of working with what's known as sublayers. And sublayers are clicking on this little caret here. We'll bring them out. You can see these are all the things that we've drawn in our document, and that's what dictates the stacking order. So if I click on this black item again, you can see that there's this little caret here that represents it. If I click and drag this upward in the document, you can see that's really had no visible effect because I'm not up high enough. But if I bring it all the way to the very top, now it becomes the new item. I think just using the right click and bringing it up is enough. I'm not a big fan, especially for beginners in the program, ever even opening and worrying about sublayers. So what would be another way that's probably more organized to have things that we always want on top of other things? Well, that's where layers can be very helpful. So, and I'm going to double click on this and give it a layer or a name, and we'll just call this 1. So we know those were the first things that we drew. And then I'm going to make a new layer by coming down here and clicking on this new layer icon. And I'll double click and I'll call this 2. So we know those are the second items we've drawn. And now I just have to make sure that I'm on the proper layer. So if I draw something now, it is going to be on top. And let's change the color of that just to make it real obvious. Now, if I go over to the layer and I click and I drag it below item number 1, now it's below. So no matter what I draw on layer 2, it's going to be behind everything that's on layer 1. So let me draw a new item here. And you can see that everything is over the top of that. And again, if I go here and I bring this up, we get the new result. One of the best features of layers, in my opinion, is your ability to lock them. So if I wanted to grab all of this stuff with a marquee and move it slightly, fine. But let's say that I did not want to move these yellow items. So I know that they're on the layer that's named 2. I can go over here right next to this eyeball thing, click here, and now if I make a marquee selection and I move, everything moves but those. I can also, with this eyeball, toggle the visibility of a layer. So now everything that's in layer 2 will not show up until I come back over here and click here. And if I need to move these items again, all I have to do is click the lock, and now I can move those. The other big benefit of the lock is it prevents you from accidentally drawing something on a layer. So if I have this locked, even though it's selected, and I try to draw a new item, you see I get this funny looking cursor here. So commit that to memory, because sometimes that's frustrating. You'll say, no matter what I do, I can't draw. Well, that's because you're trying to draw on a locked layer. Now let's say you draw something and you're like, oops, I meant for that to be on my other layer. That's a quick, easy solve. Just select whatever it is that you want to move to the new layer. You get this little icon representing its selection, and you move it. Now it probably won't let me move it in there because it's locked, so I'll unlock it, click and drag. Yep, now it'll let me move it in there. And now if I toggle the eyeball, you can see that this item has been moved away from this layer to that layer. If you just want to lock one item on a layer, the easiest way, in my opinion, to do this is you select it. I like to shortcut, it's Command 2, but you can also come up here to Object and then Lock and then Lock Selection. So you select it first, then you Command 2 or come up here to this keyboard sequence. Now, even though the layers are unlocked, if we make a selection here and we move this, you can see that item doesn't move. Now what just happened there behind the scenes is if we click on the sublayers, you can see that that item is locked there. But you know how I told you I usually don't even fuss with the sublayers? What I would do to unlock this is I would just simply come up to Object and unlock all, and now any sublayer lock will be unlocked. So the only reason you'd have to go into those sublayers is if you had multiple locked ones and you only wanted to release one of them, but that's a rarity. One last tool I want to tell you about is the eraser tool. So that's housed right here along with the scissor tool. Grab the eraser tool, and if I just start swiping along, what happens is anything can be erased. Now if I Command Z that, if I make a selection first, then I bring out the eraser tool, even though it looks like I'm going to be erasing a lot of stuff, I only will actually erase in the item that was selected. If I want a bigger eraser, easiest way is use the bracket keys, which are just to the right of the P key. So if I go to the far right one, it'll make that bigger, and now when I erase, it takes a bigger chunk out of things. And again, if I deselect and do that, it's going to take a bigger chunk out of everything that it comes into contact with. And one more unique thing about the eraser tool is that it has a function that works with the Option key. So if I hold down the Option key and click and drag, it makes a marquee, and then when I release the mouse and the Option key, it just basically takes care of anything that's in that path. And that will also work with first making a selection, and easier to just show you that. So let me just back up here a step with Command Z, and if I first make a selection and then I grab the eraser tool, hold down the Option key, it only applies to the selection.